Hello there, people of the internet. I have heard a couple of times people tell me that bigger bullets means more energy onto their target, and that's not necessarily always the case. There are quite a few times where having a larger weight projectile will do more damage onto its target. However, the general rule, if I can get this correctly this time, is that if you double a projectile's size, you double its energy onto its target. However, if you double its velocity, you quadruple its energy onto a target. Even if you have a smaller weight projectile, if you increase the velocity of that projectile, it becomes dramatically more effective than just increasing the weight of that projectile. And that's one of the main reasons why 223-556 is so effective. It's a little tiny 55 grain or 62 grain projectile, and it's going to be traveling at anywhere from 3,000 to 3,200 feet per second, which is extremely fast. And at those velocities, it dumps a lot of energy onto its target. However, the main reason, there's a lot of reasons. Let's go ahead and talk about, actually a good example is a little bit of history behind when smaller bullets and larger bullets kind of started to separate in terms of the gap of them being used. At the turn of the late 1800s, early 1900s, smokeless powder was in development and becoming a very widely adopted and used thing simply because it burned dramatically more effective than black powder. Black powder only launched projectiles at a specific velocity, and like the absolute max velocity you're going to get on a black powder is probably about 1,700 feet per second, maybe 1,800 feet per second, but man, that is like really pushing it for black powder. Versus smokeless powder, nowadays we can achieve like 4,500, 5,000 feet per second with our projectiles if we use the right loadings and the right projectiles, depending on what it is that we're talking about. And we can achieve some very incredible velocities that dump just a tremendous amount of energy onto whatever target it is that we're shooting at. So actually I have myself a couple of examples out here. I got myself a couple of little cheat sheet numbers written down on my hand. This right here is a 4570 trapdoor Springfield, and apparently the hammer is already back on this thing. This right here is a 405 grain bullets behind 70 or in front of 70 grains of black powder. And this right here launched the bullet at about 1,400 feet per second, and on target that puts about 1,750 foot-pounds of energy onto that target. Now a 450 grain projectile, or not 450, a 405 grain projectile traveling at the 1,400 feet per second, that is a huge bullet traveling very quickly. This right here is a 4570. This right here is just my range load. That is not the proper projectile that would be fired. But the projectile that would be fired, I have in my pocket somewhere. This right here is a jacketed projectile. Out of a trapdoor like this, you would see like a cast lead one like this right here. But this is the size of the projectile. This is a 405 grain bullet that would be fired out of this 4570 case. So it would look something like this right here. And that is a massive bullet being sent out of a massive cartridge downrange. And at 1,400 feet per second, that is moving very quickly. 1,750 pounds of energy put onto the target is a incredible amount of energy. These right here were used for buffalo hunting on a very normal occurrence. This right here was the standard issue round for the United States Army during that time period. However, 4570 was replaced technically by a 3040 Krag, but that's another story. With all intents and purposes, it was replaced by the far more dramatically capable 30-06. This right here is a 150 grain bullet inside of this 30-06, but we're going to go ahead and talk about the M2 ball spec ammo. That was a 150 grain bullet, which was the military loading, and it traveled at about 2,800 or so feet per second. And that put 2,600 foot-pounds of energy onto its target. So we have this large weight, fat 405 grain projectile traveling slower, being replaced by a much smaller, much lighter weight bullet traveling significantly faster, and that puts significantly more energy onto its target. Like I said, 30-06, the M2 ball, 2,800 feet per second, about 2,600 foot-pounds on target. versus the old school, much larger, much heavier 405 grain bullet launched from the 4570 at 1400 feet per second, putting only 1750 foot-pounds of energy onto their target. So, smaller bullet traveling faster does way, way more energy on target than our 4570. Nowadays, modern propellants and whatnot, it's a completely different story, and we have completely different loadings. Like, for example, modern 4570, like the really, really hot stuff that you load only into like one of those single-shot Ruger 1 models, Mark 1, whatever that rifle is. It's got like a Martini Henry dropping block action inside of it. And it's made by Ruger. I cannot remember what it is. But there are 4570 loads that fire so dramatically powerful that the pressures inside of that 4570 chamber can only be housed inside of a very, very strong system. You definitely don't want to load a very hot pressured round inside of something like an old school trapdoor Springfield. This is an original one. It is not a reproduction. And the date on this one is 1882. We see that right there on the side of the stock. It is incredible that that marking is still there. But just because something has a very large bullet does not necessarily mean that it is going to be more powerful than something that has a very small bullet. I know for 30-06, the most powerful round I've ever seen out of a 30-06 with my own eyes chronographed. I'm sure there's more powerful rounds out there. It was a 220 grain bullet traveling at about 3,500 feet per second. Which is a stupidly fast, heavy round, and I have no idea. I have not done the actual math. Maybe one of you guys can do the math for me. I have no idea how much energy that puts on the target, but man, I imagine it is a dramatic amount more. But the commercial load that I just mentioned, what the hell is that thing? It looks like some kind of alien. The commercial load that I just mentioned was that is a different loading than the military loading that the military was using. Commercial loadings are very, what's the word I'm looking for? Not regulated. Of course, they do have to follow SAMI spec and SAMI pressure. Otherwise, they got to be like labeled as plus P or plus P plus or something like that. But they got a certain pressure curve that they have to follow just due to the specifications. But they have dramatically less limitations than something like military-style ammunition does. Military-style ammo, you have one type of bullet and one type of powder that makes one type of pressure curve and one type of velocity for that bullet that all of your rifles are going to be chambered in and zeroed for, and it's just logistically speaking, you have that one kind of bullet. And if you have other kinds of variations of bullet, then you try to get them to be of that weight as well. Like if you have full metal jackets that are 150 grain and you have a belt of machine gun ammo that has tracers on it, you try to get those tracers to be around 150 grain as well, so they go in the approximate same location that those other 150 grain projectiles are going. Whereas commercial loads, you can get as low as like 100 grain or even 80 grain 30 caliber projectiles to fire from a 30-06 to get some real significant velocities. And you get as heavy as like 260 grain, although I'm sure that you can get heavier bullets than that. There's just a dramatic amount of variation whenever it comes to commercial loading. So just because of that right there, there's a lot of speculation. I imagine that there's some 4570 out there that puts more energy on the target than some 30-06 out there. If we're talking like heavy bullets traveling fast versus like lightweight bullets from a 30-06, they're at a certain charge point or have a certain pressure curve, or like I said, there's just so many different variations. There's no way to really be able to gauge and tell. But this right here is one really good example if we're talking about the original military loadings, going from the original 4570 405 grain bullet traveling at 1400 feet per second to the newfangled 30-06 150 grain bullet traveling at 2800 feet per second. Dramatically more power onto the target. So these right here, this is not a full power 4570. This is just one of my range loads that I have loaded up for taking out to the range. This has about the same power as a 44 Magnum. I'm just going to go ahead and dump this one into the car because I'm out here with this gun. I may as well. That actually does have quite a bit of power behind it. Look at all the smoke coming out of the car. That was a cast lead round, 250 grain projectile, I believe. And this is the funnest part. Eek! Oh goodness, I actually caught it. How do you like that? But that right there, that was, like I said, not as powerful as one of those old school black powder 405 grain 4570s. So don't take that recoil aspect to mean that that right there is what you would want to expect from that. I do, however, have a full power 150 grain hunting soft point round made by Winchester, I believe. Yep, Winchester 30-06 that we're going to run from this Sporterized 1917. This is a 308 diameter bullet. 150 grain should be traveling out of this 24-inch barrel, I believe, at about approximately, rough estimations, 3,100 feet per second. So significantly faster than that 4570 that we just fired. And it's a lighter weight bullet, but has dramatically more energy. So as a result, this is going to recoil quite a bit more. Oh, goodness. Yep, that was definitely quite a bit more recoil. Look at all the smoke coming out of that thing. I love shooting the car with all the different kinds of rifles that I have. I wonder how much money just in ammunition I have inside of that car. At this point, it's basically being shot in half. I have seen cars shot in half with, you know, a variety of different guns, but I don't think, like, the only time I've seen cars shot in half is like full auto, full power rifles. I don't think anyone's ever done it with bolt actions, especially bolt actions used from all around the world. I wonder how heavy that car is with the lead that is now inside of it. Whenever I scrap that thing, I'm going to get just a tremendous amount of money, assuming that I don't completely shoot it into gravel. Anyway, folks, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I sure had a lot of fun with it. So I'm going to say, hey, thanks for watching. I do appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you all in the next episode. Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt action shotguns aren't more mainstream.